Hey guys, welcome back to the channel and thank you for joining us. Now, we're back on our BMW Swap Defender 90 build. Now, if you haven't already seen the episode, click onto my channel link and have a look at the last video where we introduced you to this build. We showed you a little bit about it, we gave it a wash, and we even pulled the engine out. Now, in this episode, we're ripping through this and we're trying to get this thing converted as fast as possible. Now, we're trying to do everything whilst, everything in the best order. So we're trying to change the steering box, which is leaking, and we're going to fit a fresh one now. We're mocking up, where the gearbox cutting is going to happen. We're going to do that first, and then hopefully we'll have the engine dropped in today, and we can start getting this engine bay looking like it should. I'm hoping in this episode we may be able to have it running, maybe not, depending on how many little bits we've got to get done. I think we've got to drop the tank down and change the fuel lines and some other bits, but at least we'll have the engine in today. So let's get straight to it. So guys, we've just been using the new fuel pump to drain out the tank. We were just struggling to actually get the tank out. Didn't actually realise this thing had a full tank of fuel. So we've actually just used the new fuel pump, which is going to be for the BMW conversion, to actually drain this tank off. 20 litres should be enough. And now we should be able to get this tank down and out, and then we can look at how we're basically going to run our new filter and pump setup. Okay guys, so that was a bit of a struggle actually. I think it's probably because the tank was quite full, so it was bloating out the tank. What is really good actually, noticing this, is when the tank came down, there was no like mud crust on top of the tank, so this thing has probably never been off-roaded. And looking under here, looking at the condition of it, everything's nice and solid. Usually these parts are, rot out quite easily because the mud will sit in between the tank. But it's nice and sturdy. The floor as well, another sign where all the Defenders kind of get rust out is the mud will get trapped in these sort of structural supports for the floor, and then it'll rot out all the aluminium here. And these look in great condition. The floor's nice and clean. This is exactly why I bought this car in the first place. Great condition, which means that we can just continue without then having to do a rear chassis and all that kind of stuff. So we brought the tank down so that we can then start to look at the setup of this, and we can start to run the feed and return lines from the sender out of the 2.4 TDCI up to our new fuel pump, then up to our filter, and up to our engine. So the next things now is literally to start cutting the gearbox for that little piece, running the fuel lines and the filters and the pump, and then hopefully we can mount this engine. So we're using the original Land Rover fittings for the actual pump itself, and then we're running our new fuel lines off of those rather than sort of just Jubilee clipping round the actual pump itself. It would be fine, but this is just more of a factory installation and one that is serviceable for the future. If you do need to change the sender, you can just unclip it rather than having to unscrew it and maybe cutting and joining on a pipe. This is just a more OEM fitting. If that'd be so annoying if that had two in and out, that would look so good there. Yeah, look, that's... I see somebody's cut that with some scissors or something. Definitely the wrong hose. I don't think it was suitable. It's gone all jelly-like, so we'll get rid of that. Just split into the memory of you just come running by. So guys, we've got our tank back up, all new bolts and everything. We've got our modified Land Rover pipes, Land Rover clips with all of our new pipes and return pipes. We've run it all as OEM as possible, keeping in mind this thing needs to be serviceable, and if anyone else looks over our work, you know, it makes sense basically. So new bolts in here, fuel tank's back up. If you come around here, new breather, and then the other breather over there, we're still waiting to get that part. We've mounted the fuel pump itself in the original fuel filter location. There is a gauze inside the sender unit of that, so it will be filtered for any rocks or any rubbish that's in the fuel. It won't get caught up in that. This then follows all the Land Rover stuff using all the original clips. It then goes through, follows the Land Rover lines, comes over the top. We've actually added some trim strip here because the fuel lines are resting on this cross member here. So we've added that so that it won't rub or anything like that. Run them over the cross member, back down the original routing. Then we've used where the fuel cooler would sit and the original Land Rover connections. We've used that to put the inline fuel filter, and this would be the pump and the filter from the BMW. And then that will go up to the engine. So this is nice and serviceable location. It's nice that we're using this, you know, the original both locations. It just makes it more OEM. So the next thing we're going to do now is cutting the gearbox. So we'll bring it down, mark it up, and start cutting the gearbox. So guys, we're done with the gearbox modification, we've done all the fueling system, and the next thing is to drop our engine in. But we've been cutting a lot of aluminium. This engine makes a bit of a mess. We've obviously spilt a lot of oil when we're doing the power steering box situated there. We just want to roll this thing outside. Well, actually, it's looking pretty good actually. Roll this thing outside, give it a pressure wash all the engine bay, the chassis legs, the top of the diff, give it a light a light wash on the gearbox because of all the aluminium filings, and just wash this engine base. So it's going to look nice and neat when we go to install the engine. So guys, we've washed the engine bay and it came up really nice. For 113,000 miles, this engine bay is in great condition. The paint's come up really nice, the chassis legs have come up really nice, the gearbox has come up really nice as well. And we're now just going to be installing the engine mounts. So we're going to pop these into their place and hopefully we can get the engine installed. Okay guys, so it's time to install our dual mass flywheel, our clutch conversion kit, and then it's literally dropping in the engine. So we'll get this installed and then we can start mocking this engine up and hopefully it's fitting for the last time. So guys, we've just fitted the new dual mass flywheel. We've torqued it up to the specification and also fitted the clutch kit, all torqued up. There's nothing left to do but to fit the engine. So I'm gonna put you on time lapse. We're now gonna fit this engine and finally see what it's gonna look like with the BMW engine fitted to a Defender. So guys, what you just saw there was us basically trying to mate the engine to the gearbox. Now we thought we would be able to get away with this because the input shaft, and the kit should actually slide together. It is always a little bit more difficult trying to align an engine to the gearbox as opposed to the gearbox to the engine. It is getting late, it's pitch black outside. And I think we're gonna have to come back to this another day, which is gonna be tomorrow. And basically I think the best course of action is probably pull the engine back out or basically bolt the engine back down, drop the engine and drop the gearbox and the transfer box out, bolt the engine into position, and then sort of manhandle the gearbox onto the engine rather than this way around, because this engine is a hell of a weight and trying to wiggle it, the gearbox is just moving with it. So I think the best option is going to be bolt the engine back in, then take the gearbox out and try and mate it that way. It might be a little bit easier. So have a bit of a tidy up and we'll see you guys in the morning. Morning guys, so it's a new day, and just before we do actually go ahead and try and drop the gearbox and do all that, we just want to give it one more shot trying to align the engine onto the gearbox. We've actually moved the gearbox back and sort of straightened it out, and we've sort of cleaned up the input shaft again, re-greased everything. We're just going to have one more go with Leon, basically trying to align the engine to the gearbox, and if that fails, we have to pull it out, drop the gearbox and do it that way. But let's get this engine mounted. So guys, we've had a little bit of trouble with this. We couldn't actually, as you guys saw earlier, we tried to put the engine onto the gearbox. It wasn't having any of it. So we took the gearbox out, still couldn't get it to mount up. So what we actually ended up doing, after speaking to a few people, was actually to literally get a bit of emery cloth and just gently take the edge off of the input shaft that actually goes into the spigot. It's now fitted home. We've then taken it apart, put it back together just to make sure that we haven't damaged the bearing, anything like that. Everything's fitted. We're now satisfied that the engine and the gearbox are mounted together, and now we're going to drop this whole unit as one into the engine bay and hopefully bolt this thing home for the very last time. So guys, the engine is finally in. What a massive relief. It was a bit of a pain to get it in actually, and it's quite a big engine, but it's amazing how much room is actually within this engine, how much room you get either side. You can see both chassis legs and all behind the gearbox. It just becomes a lot sort of further forwards into the radiator. Fairly straightforward, but a little bit tricky. Cars are never straightforward, as easy as you like to be. I'm literally just trimming up all the BMW looms, so trying to isolate what we don't need, what we do need, trying to get rid of some of the original body connectors. What is it you're doing?
I'm going to be doing fuel lines, coolant hoses, turbo, turbo intercooler hoses.
All that good
Just,
stuff.
yeah.
So now it's the boring part. We've
Plugging bits in.
kind of got to the point where, you know, 80% of the work, 80% of the work gets done fairly quickly, and then the final 20% is mostly this kind of stuff. We've got to get all this stuff plugged in, the ECUs, etc. Run the AC lines, get the radiator back in the intercooler, etc. And we should be able to fire this thing up.
Hopefully so.
Stay with me if you want it. Stay with me if you want it. Stay with me if you want it. Stay with me if you want it.
Redo that. So guys, what you've just seen there is Leon changing the water pump on this BMW engine. What we want to do is give this thing a fresh service before we finally actually turn the key, make sure it's got fresh oils, fresh belts, fresh thermostat, fresh water pump, etc. So we're going to wrap up the episode here, guys. I hope you enjoyed this one. We sorted out the fueling system, we've got the engine finally in its position. I've also sorted the power steering lines and a number of the electrical items that need to be sorted before we actually go ahead and start this thing. So guys, I really hope you're enjoying this build. Do let me know what you think in the comment section below. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. And don't forget to give us a follow on Instagram, which is @JuiceMotors. And we'll see you guys for the next update on this build.